All right, we are live. Ian Mullane, welcome back to the Future of Fitness. It's been a minute.
It certainly has, sir. Thanks very much for having me back. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I was. You and I were just trying to sort it out. I think it's been about 3 years, right? Since
Yeah.
it was either pre-pandemic or right at the beginning of the pandemic. We had a great conversation, and you've done an excellent job of the white papers that you release and the education that you're putting out and into the industry, and trying to keep people informed and adapting to what AI is doing is really critical. And when we last did our interview, whenever that was 3, 4 years ago, AI was just kind of this mythical thing, right? It was like no one really knew, like, whatever, that's going to be, 2040. And now it's like in Q3 here, 2023, AI is just almost become ubiquitous in everything. It's like, well, if you're not playing with it, then you're not playing the game. So it's been fascinating. Let's just start with that because I want to set the table, just give you an update, like give us an update over the last 3 years if you can, Ian, like what's been going on with you and KeepMe.AI.
Well, the last 3 years have been eventful. I think it's fair to say for a whole bunch of reasons. The business itself was founded around about starting at 2019, and 2020 obviously came along, and one would suggest that that would have always been a difficult period of time. But for us, it actually wasn't. I think that we found ourselves at a good juncture where we were able to support the customers that we did have, and we're able to continue growing over that particular period of time. So if you remember our premise was that within each operator, there is a set of data which we always believe to be predictive and to be valuable in the context of both member retention and in member and sales. So how can we utilize this to be able to generate better conversions and more sales, and how can we retain more members? So ultimately, from a financial perspective, increase financial performance. We've been, I would suggest, successful over the last few years. We have enjoyed considerable success. We're north of 50 customers in 13 countries now. We add 3 or 4 customers on a monthly basis as a whole. And we've refined the offering. So in as well as that specific offering, where we also try to drive value is with quick deployment, meaning that we are not involving our customers with lengthy implementation periods. Generally, it's done within a 4 or 5 week period. And we've worked extensively on making sure that it has a low ongoing resource cost, meaning that it doesn't have the necessity to have dedicated resources that are just trying to work it. So now I would comfortably say that we are on a path to generating a strong customer base around the world, and one that we've been eternally grateful to for providing us a lot of the input, which is now shaping the product development in the way that it has been going.
Yeah, gosh, you found yourself right in the middle of it. I'm sure you saw it coming, right? With AI and
I'd rather be lucky than good, Eric, to be honest.
yeah. Right. Maybe for the sake of the conversation today, because I want to get into a couple of things. Obviously the updates that you're doing with Keep Me, and you gave me a nice little demo right before this, and it's really impressive. The white paper, your most recent one, I was breezing over it this morning. Data and AI, the ultimate executive briefing, and people can find that on your website at KeepMe.AI. Also, let's start with this. There's a couple definitions that I think would help a lot. 3 of them in particular: machine learning, artificial intelligence, large language models, right? Those get thrown around a lot. Can you, and I'm not looking for like a, Webster's dictionary definition, but just to you, like, how do you define those 3 things, and what's the differences between them? Because I think that'll help set the table for the things we're going to talk about today.
I think that probably the best way of looking at it is to say that machine learning and large language models of generative AI are branches of ultimately artificial intelligence. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
in our context, we've always utilized machine learning predominantly through what we would call prediction or classification problems, like what will happen? Will this happen? Will that member churn or will they not churn? Will they buy or will they not buy? Machine learning is an excellent tool to be able to deliver that level of prediction. The reason being, or how, if you'd like to understand, is that you would take a data set, And that data set within it would have all of the outcomes. So did they stay or did they go, as an example, in a membership database? You would take 80% of that data, the historical, and you would train the machine learning model on that data. And it uses decision trees, right? It uses, you remember, yes, no, moving down, different aspects, all the way down to the actual solution. We use a methodology called random forest, and as technical as it may sound, it will very clear why it's called random forest shortly. The random forest will look at the data set and it will put every single permutation of a variable together to see if it had any impact on the ultimate outcome on that side. So for 43 data items, 42 data items, which is what you would expect to see in a standard club management system, it will generate 8.8 million decision trees just for that one member that will get us to the outcome. Now, it does it randomly, and it does 8.8 million trees. Therefore, that's why it's called random forest. There's nothing complicated in that particular aspect of it. But how accurate is it? Individually or statistically, you're not going to find that any one of the outcomes in itself is going to drive the accuracy of the model. But when you consolidate them together, so it's called an ensemble learning method, you are going to get anything between 92 to 95%. Though we have customers, you've been on the website, that are reporting a 98% accuracy. Now, that's not, will I leave tomorrow? That's, I joined in January, will I be here in the following December? Right? That's a very strong, and that is the definitive here. Because for an operator, that then gives me this incredibly long runway to be able to change the outcome. But more importantly, it allows you as an operator an understanding of what the outcome's likely to be, even before I do. If I've joined you in January and I'm being flagged up on a platform as leaving in December, and you come to me in February and say, we think you're going to leave, I've just joined. Right? There's no way I'm leaving. You know, what are you thinking about? I've just paid my membership dues. But in reality, the signal is already there in the noise, and the platform's able to do it. So that's machine learning. We use that for a whole host of classification problems within KeepMe. Large language models. Okay, so thank you, ChatGPT. The analogy I've been using a lot recently is that it's a bit like when I was using the internet back in the early 90s on the trading floor. There wasn't many of us using it. We were all viewed as pretty geeky. And the reality was that to be able to extract value from the World Wide Web was very, very challenging because there was, you need to know what you're doing. And then Netscape came along and suddenly we had this thing called a graphical user interface thrown on the front end called a web browser. And the next minute, everybody could extract value from the internet. AI is having its web browser moment at the moment in the form of ChatGPT, right? Because what they've done is they've been able to put an interface, in this case just natural language, on the front end of an incredibly sophisticated AI model and allow anybody, regardless of their technical capabilities, to have the ability to drive that value out. So what's a large language model? A large language model is effectively a super intelligent parrot, but it's gone beyond the capability of just being able to parody to what we've said. It's now got to the stage that it can have a conversation with us as if it was a human. And it's able to do this because of the incredibly large quantity of data, in this case text, that it's been trained on. And that would be the internet, that's books, that's articles, and a whole host of stuff. Which means it's now got the capability to form conversations, generate conversations, and engage on topics of any nature whatsoever. It doesn't have any conscience. It doesn't have any feelings about what it says. It's not a human, but it has the capacity to engage. And because it uses natural language, by definition, it's an interface which we can all engage with. And that's why we're seeing some of the success that it's been having.
God, it just sounds so futuristic, but it's not because it's here.
It is. You use it and I use it every single day.
I use it every day. I play with it all the time. In fact, I woke up last night at 4 a.m. Mainly because I was thinking about an invoice dispute I had with our home builder. But then that dovetailed, as you know, as things do at 3 or 4 in the morning, into like AI. And I was just sitting there thinking about AI. I'm like, God, what about air traffic controllers? Like, is that job done? Like, what, when you look at these complexities that we have that, humans like, We got to sleep, right? We have stress. We have families that stress us out, right? We have all kinds of things that happen in our lives that affect the way we perform. But AI doesn't do that. It doesn't need to sleep. It doesn't need, it can handle
No.
like that to me was like the perfect. And I was like, oh my God, I should write this down. This is like the perfect AI application is like all these human mistakes that could possibly happen. We can now take away and just put in the hands of AI and, everyone, it can be way more efficient. And I think that's, the kind of stuff that just blows my mind
But
at
I
four in
have
the
to
morning.
say, I'm a pilot, and the ATC thing, I had not actually given any thought to that one at all. I mean, I'm probably a bit lazy in that regard. That I've got, as we've had a chat before, I've got children, young adults now going through education, and I would not be encouraging law to any of them in any shape or form. I would be struggling even to look at accountancy to any shape or form. I think medical definitely is going to benefit rather than be impacted by any great degree, because I still feel at this stage there's going to be a need for people to still open up the individual to actually perform. But I think the diagnosis stuff is starting to get done. And I won't share too much detail, but I know of an individual recently who has had, just through their interactions with a large language model, has been able to turn around the outcome for their treatment just by being able to engage with some variances with their practitioner, who quite frankly was closed off to every single possible outcome. And all this individual did was, when they got their bloods back, they pushed the entire blood work into the large language model and said, what would be the outlier possibilities for my diagnosis and potential treatment routines? And just being able to understand that better and then go and engage with their practitioner, who probably thought they'd hired somebody on the outside, has given them a different outcome. And I'm delighted to say a successful outcome as well. So lots of exciting stuff going on in this area.
Yeah, and allow me to get us back on track here. I dove us off a little bit, but the in your white paper you mentioned, data is gold, and I believe it. I guess the big question is, and this will probably spur into many other points of conversation, but how do we take the data? How do we make it gold? How do we actually take what we already have, right, and turn it into more revenue for gyms? I mean, that seems to be the at the surface layer at this point where we're at. That's where people want to focus, right? It's like, well, how
Yeah,
do I turn this into more revenue?
yeah. I think I have, in my limited years, if you say the last 4 or 5 years, I have seen a considerable change in the capability of people to engage with data, first and foremost. So initially, one of my reservations about our sector as a whole was that there was very little currency placed in some of the core applications having APIs that would allow data to flow out and into other tools. And my concern, and I sit on the UK Digital Futures group with UK Active, and my voice concern there was an inhibitor to digital transformation was that the tools that were coming into the marketplace, whether they be for our sector or for the more wider marketplace, were going to require data in a structured format. And there was not too many of the club management software providers at that time that were giving those capabilities. I'm pleased to say there's been a change in that. And now I think that it's probably a primary thing where, when people are acquiring a new club management software platform, the first thing they're looking at is, do they have an API? And that's going to be critical. The world of large language models is going to, and you and I have just taken a look at how that will change, because what has been required in the past is to be able to take this data into a structured format, and then to be able to predict how the user would like to use that data so that you can show it to them in output. With large language models, what's going to be possible, as I've said, I've just shown you, is the capacity to take in this data and then to run natural language questions over the top of it. So rather than going to a dashboard and seeing, which is great, by the way, there's nothing wrong with dashboards, but looking at a dashboard which is fixed with the metrics that we chose there and then to believe to be the North Star of the business, we can go to these dashboards and then we can start to understand what the underlying variables is. So for instance, if we were to have a look at what our net retention is, if we were to have a look at what our sales conversion is, phenomenal. But those metrics, they're one-dimensional. You can't really do a great deal with them. You had great retention last month. Why? We had poor conversion last month. Why? Well, why in the conversions? Because of our social media ads didn't perform as well as they recently did. Why? Right? And that why is just a constant that can be delivered into a large language model, and it can start delivering more and more. The way I'm looking at it and the way we've built it in ours at the moment is, rather than presenting visuals anymore, which tend to be one-dimensional, is we will place a narrative underneath. And the narrative is probably providing a level of insight that even if it was possible for an operator, an individual data analyst to find it, it would take so much work for them to do so. And because we're logical creatures, and because we're very much pattern recognition creatures, we've got, in many cases, we've got biases which are reflected when we try to review data and understand how we can perform better, because we believe it must be, and then we go into the data to find it. In the world of a large language model, those type of biases are eradicated, because large language models, just like machine learning algorithms, they don't care about your expertise. They don't care you've got 20 years experience as an operator or that you're the best in class. All they care about is what it can see in the data, and then it offers up its opinion for you then to make decisions. So how do I think it will directly impact? There is no operator in the world now who shouldn't comfortably be able to predict within a 9-month window which of the members will not be with them in 9 months' time. If they then choose not to do anything with that, that's down to them. But if I'm an operator and I believe that I can with that type of runway, I would expect that I've got the capability to at least change the outcomes for quite a few of those, particularly nowadays with the automation tools and the rest of it that are available as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. What you were showing me, Ian, right before this, made me think, like, my experience as an operator too. It's like, and this was a while ago. I'm dating myself. I don't need to do it, so it just say it was a while ago. The platforms that I use as far as CRMs, from Zen Planner to Mindbody to Wodify to all of these, right? I went back and forth all the time because I never really found what I wanted. But the tough part was, like, I never could get the dashboard or the data and the analytics that I personally wanted. I have a good colleague of mine. He's been on the show, Dan Waimura. He's the CEO of PushPress, and he talks about having a really solid North Star metric.
Yep.
And I'll let him tell what his is, but I'm like, gosh, it is really important to have one or two metrics that are the north. If you're following this correctly, and I think his is like check-ins per month per client. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, that's what he recommends for gym. Because if you do that right, if you can get that to a certain percentage, your gym will be wildly successful. So it's like taking all of the, like you mentioned, a narrative, right? Like taking the data, building a narrative that's workable. How are you guys approaching that problem? Because obviously you have a very slick solution that you have right now and probably working on more.
Well, I think Dan's completely right. I mean, that you need to take a look at some of those core metrics and things. For instance, in a studio context, even in a fitness operator's context, attendance never moves away from being a core variable, because if they're not attending, they're not engaged, and if they're not engaged, they're not going to renew, right? So, none of that is open for question. I think where AI starts to drive in is that it will see prior to that non-attendance, because there will be aspects in there. For instance, it'll see that because you came in from a particular lead source, and because you're a certain age and particular gender, and because your location is a certain place, and because your average attendance has dropped over the previous 2 weeks compared to the previous 2 weeks, I can talk logically to try and explain the point. But the reality is that when a machine learning algorithm is looking at it, it's looking at every single data item and constantly putting them together to see what it is that's actually pushing it through. I think that's where there is a significant value. If I am engaging with members when they have stopped coming, the probability of me re-engaging them, I haven't even tried, because I've never had to do it, because I've always used this as a method, is probably very low, because I've stopped. And you're reminding me that I'm not doing it. Some come back, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, definitely you can come back on those things. But What you want to be able to do is catch that as early as possible. And you may only be catching it 2 weeks before non-attendance starts, but it's probably the most crucial 2 weeks in the next 9 months of the membership on that particular side of things. The other aspect is that I think all of these tools are only as valuable as the action that is taken with them as well. So, as I said, I can flag up to you who's not going to be there in the next 9 months' time, and I can give you plenty of runway, but you've got to do something about it. But then the question, and this is where the AI comes into it again, is what do you do, right? And then how do you do that on a personalized basis, right? Because, we predict these guys are not going to be attending in 4 weeks' time. Well, let's just send them out exactly the same vanilla email to say, hey, why don't you come and join us for this class or that class or whatever? It needs to be better than that. You need to make sure that you are communicating around a value proposition that they're likely to want to engage in a format that they may want to, whether that be in video, in email, whether that be in text, whether it be in a WhatsApp or something else along those lines. It needs to have the gender definition within it as well, where appropriate in that particular aspect of it. So, don't go and send me a picture of a buff 23-year-old male, taking into account my age, right? It's not going to be the appropriate on that side. When you marry, give you an example of how we employ it. Let's say, for instance, you want to do a PT campaign. First thing the machine learning can do is it'll tell you who will come to you for that PT campaign. So it'll tell me that Eric will buy PT if he's given an offer. Okay? So I pitch Eric on a 10-pack. Eric gets that 10-pack. He's not done PT before, and he's thinking, that's a commitment I'm not prepared to do. So Eric passes. He goes to Ian, and they pitch Ian on a 1-pack. Well, Ian was going to buy it all day long. If he'd have pitched him a 10-pack, he was going to take it. So the way we utilize this here is that not only does it identify the people with the highest probability of the purchase, but it also assigns the probability of how much they will purchase. So that if Eric might get served a 1, and he will purchase, but serve him a 10 and he won't, but serve Ian a 1, he'll purchase it, but on the 10. Then, having done that, you then use the automation to serve the correct offer with the correct visual at the correct time with the correct method. That in itself is content optimization. If you do that, it's very difficult to see who will not perform better than, we want to do a new PT campaign. Let's throw out the PT offers for the next 12 months and see who wants to take it.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. It really is. I mean, just the ability, it's not just, okay, who's ready for PT, but how much PT can they handle, or, subsequent side programs, or, supplements, or whatever it may be, who's ready for, a recovery pack of cryo, whatever. I mean, there's a million applications for it, I'm sure. The data sources, I mean, that's a really big thing. I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about AI, and obviously I'm fairly fascinated with it. The crap in, crap out, right? Like you get bad data, you're going to get bad results. So let's just, as mundane as it may sound to talk about data, because it's everywhere about us and everyone else. What are the primary data sources that we have now? And obviously there's whatever's in the CRM, right?
Yeah.
There's whatever's publicly known, like someone's, location, or whatever you can scrape the internet and find about people. But what are some of the big data inputs that are usable, right? Not just, sources of data, but things that we can actually apply within these models.
I think the primary remains the club management system for a great deal of what I would call the fundamental structured data. So the payment data and the attendance data and the initial sign up and the source data, that type of aspect of it as well. That in itself can generate a great deal for instance, if Keep Me Sales, for instance, is looking after the sales aspect and then passing it into the membership into the club management before it comes into Keep Me on a membership side of things, you are effectively enriching the data. So all of the stuff is captured up at the sales side. What lead source did they come in? What campaign did they come in? How did they find us? Did they do a trial? Did they do a visit? All of that type of stuff. And then it goes into the club management system. And the club management system then enriches it around with data such as their attendance, their sign-ups for newsletters, those type of things. And then, the membership side of Keep Me can take it a little bit further. logically, other areas that can be utilized would be things like MPS platforms. They're useful. They're useful for a data source. I'm not going to comment on them relative to their capabilities around retention. I've always suggested that people who use MPS platforms are 10 times more likely to stay with you, whether they give you a 0 or a 10, because they're still engaged. It's the ones that aren't giving you any MPS scores I need to worry about, in my opinion. But there's that. Wearables is, I've said it in the Future Fitness paper, which I wrote before the data and AI one. Wearables are going to play an enormous part in the operator's fitness proposition going forward. Not because they are going to be tying themselves to a particular one, but because the data is becoming more and more freed. So out of my Apple Health or my Google Health at the moment, I can record and hold so much more information, including stuff that's coming from my Whoop, coming from my Aura, coming from my Apple Watch, all of these data sources. What that's allowing is for the models to further personalize the content that's delivered. And when I say content that's being delivered, I'm not talking about, do you want to buy more PT, or we've got a new class that's coming in. I'm talking about customizing on a member-by-member basis club newsletters. I'm talking about posting automatically relevant content that, for instance, if I am identified as a vegan who's got a current goal of trying to build muscle, right, then having particular programs which are pushed my direction, which meet that criteria, which are then in turn further flexed by the fact that seeing my health data, they can see how satisfactory I am doing and whether there needs to be any modifications. I showed you the content creation as well just beforehand. One of the biggest challenges operators have is not just around the content that they send out in the form of engagement emails, but also being able to put together relevant content for their particular type of audience. I mean, let's face it, a CrossFit box is going to have a very different audience than a Planet Fitness, to an Equinox, to one of the cycling studios, right? One of the challenges in there is how do you consistently push out content which is relevant, that is going to keep people engaged, keep people within the community, and keep people understanding the importance of the product and the offering that you've got. And I think the large language models, again, are going to play a significant part in that, because they will take away that fear of the blank page and allow content creators to start building much more extensive but also personalized content that can be utilized for education.
And that's one of the things that it brings up a really good point that I ask the question all the time, and maybe you can look at it, give us your insights into the future, where else is going, because wearable data is very powerful. I love that you have the Whoop and the Apple Watch combo. Good for you, rocking the super combo. Right now I feel like we're doing the obvious right now with AI, right? Like we're working on retention, we're working on increased value per member. All of these things that are really important from operations standpoint. Like, first of all, we have to run successful businesses, then we can solve the world's problems. If we're worried about revenue, then we can't do anything. But I'm most interested in is like, well, how do we get better health outcomes for more people? And you touched on a lot of that. Is like, well, personalization is huge, and that's where data comes in and helps personalize that fitness journey for people. So when you look at, like, I guess I know it's a broad question, but how are we actually going to deliver better health outcomes for people who maybe, weren't atypically engaged in what we're doing as an industry?
I think I am an unabashed provider to an operator rather than to the consumer. So keeping that as my direction within the business,
Sure.
what my role and my business's role to do is to keep members with the operator for longer, right? Just by that simple task, I am improving health outcomes because of that. Now, it is not just about the simple approach of saying, because we've identified they're not going to be with you for much longer, you need to rush out there and find a way to keep them. It is about equipping operators with the tools to be able to engage with the wide variety of people that come to them. If I use a large language model and I am a PT and I want to understand what are the variables I need to consider when I'm dealing with a vegan practitioner that's looking to go into a bodybuilding competition, for instance, or if I am looking at a ex-athlete who's looking to come back in from rehabilitation and is choosing to spend the time in the weights room when I've got a good understanding of whether it be a reduction in shoulder movement or whether it be that there's an ACL injury. I've got the capacity to use these large language models, which we integrate within KeepMe, to start to understand both the premise and possible solutions for discussion. I'm not suggesting they replace ever, but I have yet to meet a PT or a person that takes responsibility for people's health outcomes that has the breadth of knowledge necessary to deal with the society that walks in through their door in all its very many flavors on a daily basis. And I think that what this is going to be able to do is to provide I do it myself on a regular basis. I use the KeepMe tool, whereby I've got my own aims. I'm telling it some of the most esoteric details that it probably doesn't need to know, but it will be what equipment's available to me, what my actual aims are, whether I've got any struggles with a knee injury, whether I'm coming off a post-hike weekend, for instance, on that side, right? And what my current schedule is relative to my diary in the week, whether that's going to involve any jet travel, whether that's got any jet lag, and what I take things too far. I wear a CGM as well, but I will also have a look at that. But I will even have a look at what is the probability that I'm keeping my hydration on point during that week, taking into account what my schedule has. And the differences that it generates. Now, I go to my PT and he gives me my program, right? But I am utilizing his program as one data item into my overall outcomes, which I'm looking for on that particular site. Why does any of this matter? Because you can probably hear from my voice, it's got me incredibly engaged in my own outcomes because I've got more control over them, because I'm finding myself easier to educate about what I should do and the impact of my actions. And I think any of us who've worn an Aura or a Whoop have now realized that alcohol plus sleep does not go, right? That's one particular aspect. It's been a disappointing part to life, but it has been a reality. But there is so much more that's starting to come out in this particular data. So, for instance, I'm now at a stage where I've been able to move by 15% over a 12-month period, my HRV. And I know you're a big practitioner in that particular area yourself. HRV is impossible to move on most cases. It's a really, really difficult metric, particularly when you're my age, to be able to push that up. But all of my outcomes are now at a level where when I engage with a health practitioner or a gym practitioner, I've got a better understanding, but also I'm finding that the ones that I'm working with, they've got a better understanding of how to engage with me. What I'm trying to do with KeepMe is to put in hand those type of tools, particularly in the generative AI side of things, to allow those providers, those service providers, to be able to engage with their audience on a different level than maybe they had before, where it's not just generic, they're able to personalize it. They'll be able to, you could quite simply say in a KeepMe context, these are the 10 groups. I would like to have an individual blog post done for each one of those, and I want to automatically send out to them based on the criteria which we have from the club management system. And that then means that not only are we posting 10 blog posts within a short period of time, but the relevance to each part of that particular member base, based on age, based on gender, based on outcomes, based on diet, based on practices, based on likes, is all taken in place. That, so I'm told from the literature, suggests how you build a community, it's how you build loyalty. And in my hope, right, that when you combine that with the rest of the KeepMe tools, if I can keep people in the gym for longer, if I can help the operators to have more people build fitness and health as a habit, then the outcomes are going to improve, and all of those other aspects, whether it be type 2 diabetes, obesity, or whatever else, will start to move down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And it's been really interesting too. I've noticed as wearables become more and more mainstay, and like I'm taking this month off drinking, which is really funny because everyone's like, I'll go out and I'm like, no, iced tea, I'm good. And people look at me like, oh, he must have a problem. Why isn't he drinking? Right? Like it must have gone too far. I'm like, no, I'm just trying to see how it improves my sleep. And unfortunately, it does improve my sleep and my HRV. And I say that unfortunately because I like to have, a bourbon, right? I like it. Makes me happy. But it does have the effects, and that's your bummer. So, but a lot of people now are focusing on their sleep. They're just aware, right? The awareness around like, okay, what affects my sleep? How many hours of sleep should I get? Am I getting deep sleep? Like all these things. I've noticed some really powerful trends, and people are worried about like, well, is it too much data? Is it going to make people paranoid? And I'm like, come on, that's an individual person's reaction to things. Like if you're going to get paranoid about your data, like, okay, I know I'm tired. I don't need a wearable to tell me I'm tired, right? And stressed out. Be like, well, okay, relax. Like, if you already know, then it shouldn't be a surprise. Anyway, I digress. I think it's really powerful about what you're saying. And I think, putting more personalization, getting people more engaged through data and their own personal data into the process of becoming healthier is really important. And that's what's, it's these aha moments that people are having, because let's be honest, we all love to think of ourselves that we're unique, right? We're all snowflakes. We all have our own journeys. We all have our own stresses, and the data, through wearables and all these other sources will tell us exactly that. It's like, no, you can, like you mentioned, if I hike 30 miles on a weekend, I go to my trainer on Monday, that data and information and insights is extremely useful, right? Because that's like, okay, let's slow it down today. We're going to do some recovery work. We're going to do some mobility. We're going to do some things to get you back on your feet so you have a great week. So it's really exciting time. One of the things I want to look at when you kind of zoom out into our industry, who do you think is using AI really well right now? And we can, be specifically to operators. Like, who do you think is really leveraging it?
Well, logically, I'm going to point to any of my customers because, for obvious reasons, they are from that perspective. If I was to pick one off the top of my head, one which I feel utilizes it to great effect, it would be an operator out in the UAE called WellFit. And they employ it across a wide side of their, mostly on the operational side, mostly around the retention. But the retention is not the North Star. Engagement is the North Star that they're actually working towards there. So how can they make sure that they increase the, I forget the actual stat, you'd find it on the KeepMe site, but they increase the average attendance by 3 or 4x over the particular period, their engagement by 10 to 12%, right? So It was a considerable element in there. I think if you look around at the AI practitioners, I think it's more important that it is the ones that are utilizing automation rather than AI. And let me tell you why. Because the AI aspect has always been phenomenal at giving you the insight. But the challenge is what do you do with the insight? And the insights themselves can't be delivered at scale generally unless you're using some type of automation. I have found it easier to get adoption of AI within an operator than automation, because automation somehow triggers off this fear of job loss. It seems to figure off this concern that the importance of the individual will not take place. And that's an area which I try to contradict quite a bit. Someone like an average customer on KeepMe will have between 38 and 47 automations in play on their platform. Some of them have got north of 100. That means that every hour of every day, between 38 and 47 things that should happen are actually happening, right? And there's a big difference there. I sat, particularly in the early days when we were building out the tool, I sat in many a room and I went through some very elaborate member journeys. And the CEOs who may, and I know one of them does listen to your podcast, will smile when he hears this, where it was drawn up in this beautiful schematic on the board. And it had as many it had as many outcomes as you could possibly imagine. If they don't do this, then it will go to this. And if they do this, it'll go to this. And if it doesn't go to this, it'll go to that. And he very proudly laid it out to me. And he said, that is why I feel we've got it covered. And there was a snigger in the room, and he turned around and he said, well, who sniggered? And he went, boss, this has never happened ever in our history. We wrote this down, but do you have any idea how many platforms and people are involved in delivering that? He said, I'm not even sure the first stage gets delivered more than 50% on an annual basis, right? Automation is where that aspect is taking over. And what automation is doing, it's giving certainty that core actions are taking place. Am I engaging with people at the right time? Am I congratulating them from hitting a milestone? Am I welcoming them to the club? Am I reminding them to download the app, right? That type of aspect. It's making sure that when I generate content, it's going out to the correct people at the right time as well, right? So don't start telling the people that are on racquetball when the new Pilates schedule's coming out, that type of stuff. Again, automation that is done on that side of things. That's valuable. But it's also then meaning that the individuals that are on the marketing teams are able to engage in the much higher value aspect of building the user personas, their member personas, understanding and finding new catchment areas, looking at how they can do that activation. Or, as importantly, individuals that are on the floor being able to engage in conversations of on a basis rather than having to worry about actual text management. So I think we will see an increased use of AI across the sector. I very much hope for obvious reasons. But I think that what I am personally excited about is when Keep Me Created comes out in the next week, I'm really keen to see what people end up utilizing that for. I've got a very, at the moment, it's going to be about blog content, sales and member engagement content and those type of things. But I am going to be very eager to see how people start to utilize this to be able to put out personalized content at scale across their membership base.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And that's the funnest thing about releasing tools like this, right? Is you get to see in the field how people are actually utilizing it and how they're doing things that you didn't expect. So that's
it will always be
gonna
that,
be fun.
that is the thing. It's, the unintended purpose tends to end up being the only purpose that matters. So if I ever look at, and anyone who's in the industry will laugh at this, but if I ever look at any of the successful aspects of development that's gone out, it's generally been a variation of the initial intended use case, which has caught fire and then moved forward. If I ever want to look at any of the white elephants that have been designed that didn't work, that I designed in most cases, it was because it was done from a position of not looking at it from that particular perspective. But yeah, I'm truly excited to see how that will adapt. We put a lot of time in putting in a big variation here, which is basically, that an operator's brand voice is learned before it starts to work on it. Like the model actually learns from its website and its blogs and all of those type of things. It's going to be great for content providers to finally be able to say, throw it at me, right? Give me the ICPs across all of our members, and I am now going to start generating content for each individual sectors in that particular thing, whether it be by their agent agenda, whether it be by their interest, whether it be their outcome, whether it be the actual part of the business which they're engaged in. I am now going to be able to generate proper personalized member content for each and every one.
Oh, wonderful. Last question for you, because I know we're starting to butt up on time and it's your Friday evening, which I appreciate and respect.
Thank you.
Do you have any legitimate, and we'll keep this in the scope of the fitness health industry, but do you have any legitimate fears about AI, what it could do to damage or shift the industry in a negative way?
Not the industry. I mean, I do overall. Obviously, I think the capability in the hands of a bad actor is logically going to be concerning to some degree. I think primarily because my bigger fear is in the areas around deepfake and that type of thing. Particularly when I look at the United States and I see how partisan that is these days, it takes such a little fire to stake something off there. And when I look at the operators within some of the particular camps around the world, the capability for a bad actor to be able to utilize the momentum of a particular political practice with a deep fake would be of a worry. From an industry perspective, no, because I think as a sector, the sector is not particularly fast at adoption of new technology as it comes through. So I think that it will probably have a period of lapse. It'll be a little bit behind on aspects of it. So I don't. So yeah, overall, I'm positive. I think that what we are going to see over the next 10, no, not even 10 years, over next, if you'd have told me, we've been working with large language models since June 22 now, right, before ChatGPT came out. If you'd have told me then what we're doing now, not what the world is doing, what we're doing now, I would have said 2025, right? And I got that.
That's funny.
Right?
Yeah.
If so, and when I look at what we're looking at doing in 8 weeks, 12 weeks time with the other stuff I've shown you again, I wouldn't have thought that was even possible this time last year. If it was a long way off. So I think that the biggest thing that we're going to notice is the rapid speed that some of this stuff is going to come through. And one of the biggest changes which is going to take place is that these things are mobile phones, which are these incredibly powerful computers. They are still designed with a necessity to do two interfaces, right? The interface that the computer needs and the interface the human needs. This is going to change quite dramatically because when we move to a large language model element of it, there's going to be no necessity for all of these blocks. There's going to be no necessity for all of these individual compartments, which we call programs and apps. We're going to move to one area where we are effectively dealing with a processing instrument that's got the capability of taking care of any of these type of instructions in natural language, where by definition it can knit apps together, right? It'll be able to bring things together where I could ask a question and say, what type of run should I be doing today? And it looks at my Apple Health data, it looks at my straw there, and it looks at my track. And it then decides where I am and at what the optimal time would be for me to go out and run this particular trail at this particular pace. By the way, Ian, make sure that you've got 1 liter of hydration in because you've been below average for the last 2 days, right? That's where the difference is going to be. How long is that stuff going to be away from? I think that we're already seeing a radical overhaul in user interfaces already. We're doing it at KeepMe, so I know that to be the case. My expectation is that we will not recognize the mobile phone in its present form beyond its physical size and its screen dimensions within 18 months. 18 months would be that aspect of it, and that's not of an insight of where it's been. It's just that I can see how it could happen.
Oh man, crazy times.
Yeah,
man.
but not good, good times, right? Good times.
Yeah, I think so. It's not boring. I'm not bored.
No,
that's for sure.
No.
And whatever it is, it's happening. So
exactly.
Get on board. Well, Ian, thank you so much for joining me. It's been it's always really great to catch up with you and get your insights. AI is something that I can't talk enough about. I just think it's so seemingly so sudden. It's so impactful. It's going to change the way we do everything. And it's, I just don't think you can talk about it enough. And I'm that guy at dinner parties that makes things weird. And I'm cool with that. Right. So, yeah, real pleasure. If people want to get a hold of you, you want to send them somewhere online, where would you like them to go?
Yeah, well, KeepMe.AI, I think, has got all of the white papers and a whole bunch of resources, including the previous podcast that I had the pleasure to do with your good self as well. And then me personally, I'm always interested in people's views on both the direction they'd like to see products like KeepMe take and also their views and concerns over AI in general. I'm happy to engage with everybody on that subject. And I very simply can be found at Ian@KeepMe.AI.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Ian Mullane.
Thanks, Eric.